Imagine being denied the seat you earned not because of a mistake, but because of who you are. Malik Johnson, a composed and powerful CEO, walked into an airport terminal expecting a routine first-class flight. Instead, he was met with suspicion, repeated demands for proof, and subtle yet painful exclusions. His platinum boarding pass and years of loyalty meant nothing to the airline staff who questioned his belonging with cold skepticism. Why was a man of his stature treated like an outsider in his own right? How far does quiet dignity carry when the world keeps telling you, you don't belong here? This story is not just about one flight. It's a journey through systemic bias, resilience, and the power of strategic justice. Malik's calm strength hides a fierce determination to turn humiliation into transformation, not with anger, but with a calculated plan that shakes the very foundation of an entire airline. Are you ready to witness how quiet resolve can become a weapon against injustice? How does one man's dignity ignite a revolution? Stay with us as we unfold Malik's story, a story that challenges us all to reconsider what respect truly means. If you believe everyone deserves dignity without exception, like, share, and subscribe now. Let's begin. The late afternoon sun poured through the towering glass walls of Jefferson International Airport's Terminal B. Golden light spilled across the polished floors, catching particles of dust that drifted lazily in the air. For most travelers, it was just another routine flight. But for Malik Johnson, it was the beginning of a journey that would change everything. Malik moved with the kind of quiet confidence that only comes from years of experience navigating high-stakes boardrooms and ruthless corporate battles. At 46, he was the CEO of Horizon Capital Partners, a firm renowned for reshaping struggling companies into industry leaders. Today, he was dressed impeccably in a navy blue custom-tailored suit that hugged his athletic frame just right. On his left wrist gleamed a vintage Hamilton watch, an heirloom passed down from his grandfather, a symbol of resilience and silent strength that had guided him through life's toughest challenges. He approached the premium check-in counter, a sleek minimalist station shielded from the chaos of the main terminal by frosted glass partitions. The line was short, but Malik's movements were deliberate, his gaze calm and composed. He presented his platinum Aerosky loyalty card and passport to Claire Simmons, the gate agent. Claire was in her late 20s, her blonde hair pulled back tightly into a bun. Her face was a practiced mask of neutrality professional, but distant. Her eyes flicked over Malik's documents once, then twice. There was a subtle pause in her breath, an almost imperceptible hesitation. She shifted uncomfortably and typed a few more commands into her keyboard. Malik noticed the extra scrutiny. He had been here before. This kind of double-checking, the slight delay, the absence of the usual friendly greeting for premium passengers, it was a pattern he had memorized over the years. Claire finally slid the boarding pass across the counter, without a word of welcome or explanation of the lounge access and other amenities Malik had come to expect after years flying first class. Her lips pressed into a thin line as she met his eyes briefly, then quickly looked away. Malik's expression remained neutral, but inside a quiet storm was building. He thought of his grandfather's words from years ago, spoken during a different kind of battle. Malik, strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes it's the calm in the eye of the storm. He tucked the boarding pass into his wallet and began moving toward the security checkpoint. The polished floors echoed under his polished leather shoes, a steady rhythm that matched the steady beat of his heart. At security, Richard Trent, a TSA officer in his early 40s, waved him toward the scanner. "Step on through, sir." His tone was firm but polite. Malik complied, walking through the metal detector without setting off any alarms, but just as he reached for his belongings, Richard's voice stopped him. "Sir, over here for additional screening." Malik paused, his hands still resting on the plastic bins. He looked at Richard calmly. This wasn't the first time he had been pulled aside for random screening, and he knew the truth. There was nothing random about it. Richard gestured toward a small roped-off area. Malik moved slowly, deliberately. He placed his hands on his head as Richard ran the wand over his body. The beeping filled the small space, mingling with the muffled sounds of other travelers and the distant announcements echoing through the terminal. As Richard began patting him down, Malik closed his eyes for a moment. He recalled 1,000 moments like this at airports, hotels, even upscale events when his presence was questioned despite all evidence of his success. This was a public spectacle meant to unsettle him, but Malik was no stranger to scrutiny. His composure was a shield forged in boardrooms where every word and gesture could be a weapon. He focused on the task at hand, counting the seconds it took for Richard to finish, each tick marking another entry in the mental ledger of indignities. When the screening ended, Richard nodded curtly. "You're clear. No apology, no explanation." Malik gathered his belongings carefully, placing his shoes and briefcase back into the bins with methodical precision. He could feel the eyes of passers-by, some avoiding, some curious, others indifferent. The weight of their silent judgments was familiar, yet unbearable every single time. Walking away from security. Malik's thoughts drifted to the upcoming flight. This wasn't just a routine trip. It was an opportunity, one he planned to seize. He would transform this personal humiliation into a catalyst for change, one calculated step at a time. The first-class lounge was just ahead, its frosted glass door a subtle barrier between privilege and the world outside. Malik pushed it open and stepped inside. The room was luxurious, with plush leather chairs and soft lighting, but today it felt colder than usual. The receptionist, a woman named Angela, glanced up as Malik approached. Her practiced smile didn't quite reach her eyes. "May I see your membership card and boarding pass?" "Please," she asked, her tone polite but with an undercurrent of doubt. Malik handed over his credentials without hesitation. Angela scrutinized them longer than necessary, eyes flicking from card to face repeatedly, as if searching for a flaw. Nearby, a young woman was quietly live-streaming on her phone, capturing the unusual exchange. Malik was unaware of the digital audience growing in real time, but he sensed the weight of observation from all directions. Angela's questions turned to small talk, an awkward attempt to unsettle. "First time flying first class with Aerosky?" she asked pointedly. The emphasis on exclusive hung in the air like a challenge. Malik's face remained calm, his voice steady. Not at all. He let the silence linger before turning toward the seating area. As he settled into a quiet corner, Malik opened his tablet. Numbers and charts cascaded across the screen: stock values, acquisition targets, algorithmic patterns. His mind, sharp and unyielding, shifted seamlessly from passenger to strategist. Outside the lounge, the world carried on unaware of the quiet storm brewing inside one man's resolve. Malik Johnson was no longer just a traveler. He was a man on a mission ready to turn every slight, every insult into a reckoning. The plane awaited, and so did his moment. The soft hum of conversation and the occasional clink of coffee cups filled the small waiting area beyond security. Malik Johnson sat poised in a leather chair, the weight of the day pressing subtly on his shoulders. He adjusted the cuff of his navy blue suit and glanced briefly at his vintage Hamilton watch, a ritual that always brought him a sliver of calm. Minutes passed, punctuated by announcements echoing faintly through the terminal. His thoughts drifted to the meeting he was headed to, a critical negotiation that could reshape the future of several companies. But here, in this airport, the game was different. The rules were not written in contracts or market indices. They were etched in biases and assumptions, disguised beneath the veneer of security protocols and customer service. Malik noticed a group of white businessmen ahead of him, all dressed in similar dark suits, confidently moving through the security checkpoint with little fuss. No extra screenings, no raised eyebrows. They carried sleek briefcases and spoke in low, assured tones. They belonged. At least that was how the system saw it. His moment came sooner than expected. Richard Trent, the TSA officer, called his name with a clipped tone that brooked no argument. "Sir, could you step aside for additional screening?" Please. Malik rose smoothly from his chair. His expression was calm, almost serene. Inside, though, a complex tangle of thoughts and emotions swirled. The sting of repeated injustice was familiar, but today the silence would be louder than any protest. He placed his belongings on the conveyor belt, his laptop, the leather-bound notebook filled with notes, and the slim black briefcase. He slipped off his shoes, setting them gently in a plastic bin. The pat-down began with the familiar beep of the wand moving along his body. As Richard ran the metal detector over him, Malik's mind catalogued each movement, the firm grip, the hesitant glance from another officer nearby, the whispered exchange between guards just out of earshot. Every detail was logged, a silent witness to a performance he had been forced to endure too many times before. The screen of his tablet lay open nearby, showing stock market charts and secure communications. But Malik's focus was sharper than any algorithm. This was not just about one random check. It was about a pattern one repeated in airports, stores, offices, and streets across the country. He remembered the last time a similar random screening had happened, how the agent casually dismissed his credentials with a skeptical glance and a pointed question about why he was traveling for business. Each of those moments was like a small wound, accumulating invisibly but deeply. Today, the wound would become a catalyst. The screening finished without incident. Richard nodded curtly. "You're good to go. No apology. No explanation." Malik slipped his shoes back on and gathered his belongings with deliberate care. The cold efficiency of the process did not mask the coldness behind it. As he walked toward the boarding gate, he could feel the eyes of fellow passengers, some avoidant, some curious, others indifferent. The unspoken message was clear: he did not quite belong. Malik's internal voice was steady. He recalled his grandfather's lessons about resilience, quiet strength, the kind that doesn't shout but withstands storms. The boarding announcement crackled over the loudspeakers. First-class passengers were invited to line up. Malik's ticket, clutched firmly in his hand alongside his Platinum Aero Sky card, guaranteed him priority access. But the journey to his seat was not straightforward. At the gate, Claire Simmons waited. Her sharp eyes flicked over his documents once again, more thoroughly this time. She asked to see his ID alongside the boarding pass, a request that no other first-class passenger had faced. There was a subtle but palpable tension in her voice as she spoke. "There's been some confusion with the tickets lately. These passes are quite expensive. Are you sure this is your gate?" Malik's voice was low and even. "I am certain. Seat 2B, on flight 512. Claire's lips pressed into a thin line. She summoned a supervisor, making a show of the verification process in front of the gathering crowd. Other passengers glanced over, some whispering, others staring with morbid curiosity. A junior gate agent muttered to Claire, "I don't think I've ever seen him before. He looks too normal. Probably someone using points or an assistant." The words stung more because they were quiet, but no less sharp. Victor Hale, seated quietly nearby, noticed the exchange. His interest peaked as he observed the subtle microaggressions unfolding like a carefully scripted drama. He discreetly pulled out his phone and began taking notes, his experience as a civil rights attorney sharpening his attention to every detail. Malik stood calm, a pillar amidst the storm of suspicion and silent accusations. He was no stranger to this game. What Claire and her colleagues did not know was that every slight, every snub was being etched into a dossier of evidence. When the final approval came, Malik was waved forward, but the whispered conversations did not stop. Claire leaned toward a flight attendant, nodding toward Malik with a look that spoke volumes. The boarding bridge stretched ahead, a narrow tunnel leading to the cabin where Malik's fight for respect would take place. Once on the plane, Malik noticed the subtle glances of other first-class passengers, some friendly, others wary. The flight attendant, Patricia Vaughn, greeted other passengers warmly but barely acknowledged Malik when he requested a glass of water. Patricia offered a strained smile, but then skipped his seat, moving on as if he were invisible. Malik remained composed, the quiet tension inside building like a slow-burning fire. He recalled the countless times his presence had been questioned not because of any failing on his part, but because of the color of his skin. Luis Ramirez, a junior flight attendant, caught Malik's eye briefly and mouthed an apology. Malik nodded slightly, appreciating the empathy even in the silence. As the plane prepared for takeoff, Malik sat back in his seat, the leather embracing him like a brief respite from the battles outside. But he knew the real fight was only beginning. The first-class lounge at Jefferson International Airport was designed to feel like a sanctuary from the noise and haste of the terminal. Plush leather chairs arranged in quiet clusters, soft lighting casting a warm glow, and the muted hum of hushed conversations created an atmosphere of exclusivity. For many travelers, it was a place to relax before boarding, a symbol of privilege and calm. Malik Johnson pushed open the glass door and stepped inside, expecting the usual welcome. Instead, he was met with a chill that had little to do with the air conditioning. Angela, the lounge receptionist, glanced up from her desk and regarded him with a measured curiosity. Her smile was polite but guarded, the kind that never quite reached the eyes. Membership card and boarding pass. "Please," she said, voice neutral but layered with something unsaid. Malik handed over his credentials without hesitation. Angela took them and studied them longer than necessary, eyes flicking repeatedly from the cards to his face, as if searching for a reason to deny what was clearly presented. Malik noticed the unease, but made no move to challenge it. Instead, He recalled the countless times subtle glances and hesitations had carved a path of exclusion through his life. A young woman nearby, seated with a laptop and a smartphone set up discreetly for live streaming, noticed the unusually prolonged verification process. Her followers had often discussed microaggressions and systemic bias, and the scene unfolding was a perfect example. She quietly started recording, her fingers moving to capture the moment. Malik was unaware of the digital audience growing beyond the lounge's walls, but he felt the weight of observation keenly. Angela's questions shifted from professional to probing. First time flying first class with Aerosky, she asked, the emphasis on exclusive dripping with condescension. Malik's voice was calm, controlled, not at all. She hesitated, searching for a flaw in his answer or demeanor that might justify her skepticism. Finding none. She nodded curtly and stepped aside. Inside, the lounge was well appointed, but Malik felt no comfort. The patrons glanced at him, some with curiosity, some with thinly veiled judgment. Across the room, Victor Hale, the civil rights attorney who had noticed the earlier gate confrontation, watched silently. He took notes with the precision of a surgeon, recognizing the patterns of exclusion that were rarely documented but deeply felt. Malik found a quiet corner, settled into a chair, and opened his tablet. The world of stocks, mergers, and acquisitions swirled across the screen, but his mind was far from business. Each slight, each whispered assumption was a data point in a mental file he had been compiling for years. The lounge, a supposed refuge, was another battleground. As minutes passed, Malik's internal dialogue churned. He thought about his grandfather's resilience. The old man had endured far greater struggles, and his strength had been quiet but unyielding. Malik understood that the day's events were not isolated. They were part of a system that needed to be challenged not with anger, but with precision and power. The live-streaming woman caught the subtle exchanges between Angela and other lounge staff. Her audience began commenting in real time, expressions of outrage and solidarity flooding the digital space. A hashtag was born, Airline Bias Exposed. Malik remained unaware, but was beginning to sense the momentum building around him. Time passed, and Borden was called. Malik closed his tablet, gathered his belongings, and stood. As he approached the gate, he noticed Claire Simmons waiting again, her posture stiff and her eyes sharp. The priority boarding announcement echoed clearly. Claire took Malik's documents once more, scrutinizing them with exaggerated thoroughness. She scanned his boarding pass multiple times and requested his ID again, drawing attention from nearby passengers. "Sir, this is for first-class boarding only," she said loudly enough for others to hear, her tone implying doubt and disbelief. "Are you sure you're at the right gate?" Malik's reply was steady and clear. "Yes, seat 2B, flight 512. Claire's skepticism was palpable. She called for a supervisor, turning what should have been a simple boarding into a spectacle. Other travelers watched, some with discomfort, others with curiosity. Malik's presence was a disruption, a puzzle that did not fit into the tidy categories Claire wanted to maintain. The supervisor gave a quick glance at Malik's ticket and gave a subtle nod, signaling Claire to let him board. But Claire's whispered conversation with a flight attendant as Malik walked through the jet bridge was loaded with suspicion and doubt. Malik felt the eyes follow him, the weight of unspoken judgments trailing every step. On board, the contrast between the warm welcomes given to others and the cold silence surrounding him was stark. He settled into seat 2B, a spacious pod of privacy and comfort. Yet the cabin felt less like a sanctuary and more like a stage set for confrontation. Luis Ramirez, the junior flight attendant, caught Malik's gaze and gave a brief, apologetic smile. Malik nodded in return, appreciating the quiet solidarity. As the last first-class passengers boarded, Malik noticed Patricia Vaughn, the lead flight attendant, watching him with a scrutinizing gaze. Her welcome was formal, clipped, and tinged with suspicion. Malik understood the unspoken message he was an anomaly to be managed rather than a guest to be served. He opened his briefcase quietly, pulling out documents and a tablet. Business would wait. Today, the real work was beginning. The announcement echoed through the terminal with practiced clarity. First-class passengers may now board through the priority lane. The voice was calm, efficient, and carried the promise of exclusivity. Malik Johnson stood near the gate, ticket and platinum Aero Sky card in hand, his posture composed but alert. Claire Simmons was waiting. She straightened her uniform with a stiff precision, adopting a mask of intense professionalism. Her eyes locked onto Malik with a quiet calculation. It was clear that this was not merely about protocol, it was a deliberate performance. "May I see your boarding pass again?" Sir Claire asked, extending her hand. Malik handed over the card without hesitation. Claire examined it as if it were a counterfeit, turning it slowly under the harsh fluorescent lights, her gaze flickering to Malik's face repeatedly. "This boarding pass is for first-class boarding only," she announced, louder than necessary so nearby passengers could hear. The words were a thinly veiled accusation, a suggestion that Malik was an interloper in this carefully curated world. "Yes, I am aware," Malik replied evenly. "Seat 2B. Claire's lips tightened into a thin line. She scanned the ticket twice more and then, as if to emphasize her doubt, demanded, "May I see your identification as well?" Malik produced his driver's license with the same calm certainty. Claire's eyes moved slowly over the card, her gaze sharp and skeptical. "There seems to be some confusion," she added, her tone heavy with condescension. "These tickets are quite expensive. Are you sure you're at the right gate?" The emphasis on expensive hung in the air, a not-so-subtle reminder of who belonged and who did not. Malik's jaw clenched slightly, but his voice remained measured. "I have flown first class with Aero Sky for nearly a decade. Is there a problem with my ticket?" Claire's expression hardened. She gestured dramatically toward a supervisor. "Michael, could you verify this passenger's documents?" The supervisor approached with an air of reluctant duty. He took Malik's papers, gave them a cursory glance, and nodded toward Claire. The message was clear. Let him pass. But Claire's voice carried on, loud enough for the gathering crowd to hear. "We've had issues recently with boarding pass errors. Sometimes economy passengers get incorrect tickets. We wouldn't want anyone to be embarrassed once aboard." Her words were calculated insults veiled as concern. The message was unmistakable. Malik did not belong in first class. Passengers nearby shifted uncomfortably. Some averted their eyes, unwilling to witness the spectacle. Others whispered among themselves, the undercurrent of tension growing. Victor Hale, seated a few rows behind Malik on the plane, discreetly recorded the exchange on his phone. His experience in civil rights litigation told him this was more than an isolated incident. It was a textbook case of discrimination. Malik handed over his platinum status card alongside his ID once more. The flicker of recognition on Claire's face was momentary but telling a brief crack in her facade of bias. At last, Claire stepped aside, permitting Malik to board. As Malik walked down the jet bridge toward the aircraft, he caught sight of Claire leaning toward Patricia Vaughn, the lead flight attendant. They exchanged a hushed conversation, their eyes fixed on Malik's retreating figure. The humiliation was far from over. Inside the cabin, Malik settled into his seat, the spacious pod offering privacy but no shield from the charged atmosphere. Patricia approached other passengers with warm smiles and personalized greetings, but skimmed past Malik, offering nothing more than a cursory nod. Malik remained silent, observing every interaction with quiet intensity. He noticed Luis Ramirez, the junior flight attendant, stealing glances in his direction, the empathy in the younger man's eyes betraying his discomfort. The flight began with a buzz of hushed conversations and the soft rustling of newspapers. Malik pulled out his tablet, immersing himself in the familiar cascade of stock data and encrypted messages. But his mind was elsewhere, cataloging every slight, every microaggression, every unspoken judgment. Patricia distributed hot towels and glasses of champagne to the other first-class passengers. When she reached Malik's row, she bypassed him entirely. Malik raised a finger, the subtle gesture catching Patricia's attention. Her smile vanished, replaced by a cold professionalism. "Economy passengers aren't entitled to pre-flight beverages," she said loudly, ensuring others could hear. The cabin fell into an uncomfortable silence. Malik's reply was steady, unshaken. "I'm in first class, as you have already verified twice." Patricia's insincere apology was a mere formality. She returned with a glass of champagne, but nearly spilled it on his tray table. Malik said nothing, his sharp eyes following her retreat. The soft murmur of the cabin was punctuated by whispered comments from passengers. Some exchanged glances, others looked away, unwilling to confront the unfolding injustice. Luis approached briefly, whispering apologies under his breath. Malik offered a slight nod, acknowledging the gesture. As the meal service began, the flight attendants passed by Malik's seat without offering the menu or taking his order. When Malik pressed the call button, Patricia returned with a theatrical sigh. "Your pre-ordered special meal isn't on our manifest," she explained, her tone dripping with disdain. "I can offer something from economy if you're really hungry." The suggestion was a thinly veiled insult, implying Malik's rightful place was in the lower cabin. Malik declined politely. "No, thank you. I will wait." Patricia shrugged dismissively. "Suit yourself, though you shouldn't be so picky, given the circumstances." As she walked away, Malik caught fragments of her whispered conversation with a junior attendant. "How do you think he got that seat?" Patricia asked. "Probably stolen points, or he's someone's assistant," came the reply. "No way he earned it." Patricia scoffed. "Did you see his watch? Probably a knockoff." The final indignity came when an elderly white woman mistakenly approached Malik's seat. Showing her boarding pass, she claimed the seat was hers. Patricia arrived swiftly, siding with the woman despite Malik's calm assertion of his rights. "Sir, would you mind moving to economy?" Patricia said, voice dripping with false concern. "We need to accommodate this passenger, for the first time." Malik's calm fractured into a quiet but fierce resolve. Holding up his boarding pass and platinum card together, he said, "This is my assigned seat, verified multiple times. Perhaps the other passengers should check her flight details. The woman examined her boarding pass carefully and flushed with embarrassment. Oh my, I'm on the wrong flight entirely. Patricia hurried the woman away without apology. Across the aisle, a white businessman who had observed the entire scene made deliberate eye contact with Malik and shook his head in sympathy. Victor Hale quietly began documenting the incidents, his phone poised to record audio while he took notes in a specialized civil rights litigation app. Malik sat back, composed once more, but his mind was already turning. The days of quiet endurance were over. The next moves would be deliberate and decisive. The hum of the aircraft engines blended with the soft murmur of passengers settling into their seats. Malik Johnson sat upright in 2B, a sanctuary of space and privacy amidst the bustling first-class cabin. Yet, despite the luxury around him, an invisible barrier seemed to separate Malik from the comfort others enjoyed freely. Patricia Vaughn moved through the cabin with practiced grace, her every smile directed at the elderly couple to Malik's left, the businessman across the aisle, the young family several rows ahead. But when she approached Malik's row, she slowed briefly, then continued onward without a word or a glance. Malik's eyes followed her retreating figure. He pressed the call button discreetly, a soft chime answering within moments. Yes, Sir Luis Ramirez, the junior flight attendant, appeared with a tentative smile. Malik cleared his throat softly. May I have a glass of water? Please, Luis nodded quickly, disappearing toward the galley. Minutes passed. The cabin buzzed with quiet conversation and the occasional laughter. Malik sat still, the silence between him and the absent service growing heavier. Luis returned, glancing nervously at Malik. I'm sorry, sir. Patricia is busy. I'll check again. Malik nodded, waiting patiently. The chime sounded once more. Luis appeared again, an apologetic look clouding his features. She says water service isn't available at the moment, but I'll bring something as soon as possible. Malik thanked him quietly and set his gaze on the window. The world outside blurred into streaks of blue and white as the plane climbed higher. Across the cabin, Malik noted Patricia's attention lavished on other passengers. She handed out pre-flight beverages with a warm smile and recommended special meals by name. To Malik, her actions were deliberate exclusions, calculated to belittle without confrontation. He recalled boardroom meetings where every word, every gesture could shift the balance of power. Here, his silence was both shield and sword. When the pre-flight drinks were distributed, Malik again raised his hand. Patricia turned sharply, her polite smile replaced by a tight expression. Economy passengers aren't entitled to pre-flight beverages, she said loudly, ensuring those nearby could hear. The cabin fell into a hush. A few heads turned in surprise. Others shifted uncomfortably. Malik's voice was steady. I am a first-class passenger. My seat and ticket have been verified multiple times. Patricia's smile wavered but remained. Of course, my mistake, she replied, retreating swiftly. Malik watched as she almost spilled the champagne on his tray, the liquid sloshing dangerously close to the edge. He said nothing, his gaze unwavering. As the meal service began, the flight attendants moved swiftly among passengers, handing out menus and taking orders. Malik reached for his call button once more. Patricia appeared reluctantly. Your special meal isn't on the manifest, she said, her tone edged with disdain. We can offer you something from economy if you're hungry. Malik shook his head calmly. "No, thank you. I will wait." Her shrug was dismissive. "Suit yourself," she muttered before turning away. Louis watched the exchange with growing discomfort. He had witnessed similar moments before, but rarely seen such calm dignity in response. Nearby, Victor Hale continued documenting the events. His fingers flew across the screen, capturing every nuanced tone, timing, facial expressions. He recognized the importance of these moments not only for Malik, but for every passenger who had ever felt invisible. The flight's turbulence grew stronger, the aircraft swaying gently. Malik adjusted his seat, grounding himself with steady breaths. The injustice of the situation was not new, but the way it unfolded was a stark reminder of systemic bias disguised as routine. Later, when an elderly white woman approached Malik's seat claiming it was hers, the tension reached a peak. She held up her boarding pass, confusion clouding her features. Patricia appeared instantly, siding with the woman without hesitation. "Sir, could you please move to economy? We need to accommodate this passenger." Malik's eyes narrowed slightly, but his voice remained composed. "This is my assigned seat. I have shown my ticket multiple times." He held up his boarding pass and platinum card in unison. The woman looked down at her ticket again and flushed with embarrassment. "Oh, dear, I'm on the wrong flight." Patricia offered no apology or acknowledgement of Malik's patience. The cabin fell silent. Malik's composure was unshaken, but inside, a fire had begun to burn. Across the aisle, the white businessman who had been observing all day met Malik's gaze and nodded in quiet solidarity. Luis Ramirez exchanged a glance with Malik, a silent understanding passing between them. Victor Hale's recordings and notes had reached a critical mass. The case was building, a mosaic of proof that could no longer be ignored. Malik leaned back, the leather chair supporting him. His watch glinted softly, a reminder of the legacy of resilience that had carried him here. The quiet fight was far from over. The soft murmur of the cabin was punctuated by the quiet clinking of silverware against fine china as the flight attendants began the meal service. The first-class cabin, usually a place of refined hospitality and warmth, was tinged today with an invisible tension that permeated every interaction. Malik Johnson sat composed in seat 2B. His posture relaxed but alert. The events of the day weighed on him like a subtle but persistent pressure. His mind wandered briefly to the countless times he had been judged, underestimated, or dismissed, not because of his achievements but because of the color of his skin. Patricia Vaughn moved expertly through the cabin, her smile polished and practiced. She offered menus and took meal orders from the other passengers with warm attentiveness. To Malik, her service was another kind of exclusion. She passed his seat without offering a menu or asking for his choice. Malik pressed the call button discreetly. The soft chime echoed through the cabin, and within moments, Luis Ramirez appeared at his side. The young flight attendant's eyes held a quiet apology. "Sir, Patricia asked me to tell you that your pre-ordered special meal isn't on the manifest," Luis explained, his voice low and hesitant. "She said she can offer you something from economy if you're hungry." Malik's reply was calm and deliberate. "Thank you, but I will wait." Luis nodded, then quickly retreated. Malik closed his eyes briefly, taking a slow, measured breath. The suggestion that his rightful meal was only available in economy was a subtle but sharp insult. It was a reminder of how deeply the culture of exclusion ran within the airline. Across the cabin, the soft rustle of menus and the murmur of conversations filled the air. Malik opened his tablet and began reviewing the stock market data and encrypted messages that had become his refuge throughout the day. He was unaware, however, that Victor Hale, the civil rights attorney seated just a few rows away, was documenting the entire exchange with meticulous care. Every whispered comment, every dismissive glance was being logged with the precision of a courtroom witness. As the service cart passed by Malik's seat again, Patricia glanced briefly in his direction but made no move to attend to him. Malik's gaze followed the cart until it disappeared into the galley. The flight encountered light turbulence, causing glasses and utensils to clink softly against trays. Malik adjusted his seat, steadying himself against the subtle rocking. Suddenly, an elderly white woman appeared at Malik's seat. She looked confused and somewhat flustered. "Excuse me, I believe this is my seat," she said, holding up her boarding pass. Before Malik could respond, Patricia was by his side. Her tone was brisk and final. "Sir, there seems to be a mix-up with the seats. Would you please move to economy? We need to accommodate this passenger." Malik held up his boarding pass and platinum card together, a public assertion of his right to the seat. "This is my assigned seat, which has been verified multiple times." The woman examined her boarding pass more carefully and blushed deeply. "Oh my, I'm on the wrong flight entirely." Patricia hurried the woman away without offering an apology to Malik. The cabin fell into an uneasy silence. Luis watched from a distance, his expression troubled. He had never witnessed service like this in first class, and the disparity between Patricia's treatment of Malik and the other passengers was glaring. Victor Hale quietly recorded the exchange, capturing Patricia's dismissive behavior and the woman's embarrassed departure. Malik leaned back, feeling the weight of every slight he had endured throughout the day. His grandfather's Hamilton watch gleamed softly in the dim cabin light, a symbol of the resilience that had carried him through countless trials. The quiet dignity with which Malik had faced each indignity was not a weakness. It was a strength, a statement that demanded to be heard. Luis approached Malik again, this time with a small tray holding a glass of water and a napkin. "Here, sir. My apologies for the delay." Malik accepted the water with a nod, his eyes meeting Luis's briefly in silent acknowledgement. As the flight continued, Malik's mind raced. The humiliations he had endured were not isolated incidents but part of a larger, systemic problem embedded within the culture of the airline. He understood that the time for quiet endurance was over. Soon, the real work would begin. The cabin lights dimmed softly as the plane cruised steadily at 38,000 feet. Malik Johnson reclined slightly in his seat 2B, the expansive leather chair enveloping him like a cocoon. Around him, the first-class cabin hummed with the quiet rhythm of hushed conversations, clinking glasses, and the occasional rustle of a magazine. Yet, despite the luxurious surroundings, an invisible tension lingered in the air, thick and unrelenting. Earlier, Malik had endured a series of subtle, yet deeply humiliating slights, the dismissive service, the repeated verification of his credentials, and the whispered doubts about his place in this elite space. Each incident was a layer of a pattern that spoke louder than words about who the airline truly valued. It was during this fragile calm that an unexpected challenge arose. An elderly white woman, appearing slightly flustered and disoriented, approached Malik's seat. Her eyes scanned the cabin nervously as she held up her boarding pass. "Excuse me," she said, voice tinged with uncertainty. "Is this seat 2B?" Malik looked up, his calm expression welcoming but firm. "Yes, it is." The woman's lips pressed together. She glanced down at her boarding pass again. Then back to Malik. Before Malik could offer assistance, Patricia Vaughn appeared swiftly at his side. "Sir," Patricia said crisply, "there seems to be a mix-up with the seating. We need to accommodate this passenger. Would you please move to economy?" Malik's eyes narrowed slightly, but his voice remained steady and respectful. "This is my assigned seat. It has been verified multiple times by both gate and cabin staff." He held up his boarding pass and platinum loyalty card as undeniable proof. The elderly woman, embarrassed by the confusion, examined her ticket carefully once more. A deep blush spread across her cheeks. "Oh my," she murmured. "I'm on the wrong flight entirely. I'm supposed to be on flight 339, not 512. Patricia offered no apology or acknowledgement of Malik's patience. Instead, she guided the woman away briskly, as if the situation was a mere inconvenience to be managed rather than a moment of injustice to be confronted. The cabin settled back into silence. But the atmosphere had shifted. Passengers who had witnessed the exchange exchanged glances, the weight of the incident settling over them like an invisible cloud. Malik leaned back in his seat, the subtle sting of humiliation transforming into a quiet resolve. His grandfather's Hamilton watch caught the soft glow of the cabin lights, a symbol of endurance and silent strength. Across the aisle, a white businessman who had been watching the unfolding drama made deliberate eye contact with Malik. He offered a slow, sympathetic shake of his head, a silent acknowledgement of the injustice Malik had endured. Luis Ramirez, the junior flight attendant who had shown quiet empathy throughout the flight, gave Malik a brief, encouraging nod. The gesture was small, but significant, a sign that Malik was not alone in this struggle. Victor Hale, seated a few rows behind Malik, continued to document the events with meticulous care. His phone recorded audio discreetly while he took detailed notes. Each slight, each dismissive word, each public humiliation was being preserved as evidence. Malik's mind raced as he contemplated the magnitude of what had transpired. This was not just about a single flight or a momentary lapse in service. It was a reflection of a systemic problem, a culture that allowed bias and exclusion to thrive under the guise of policy and procedure. His thoughts drifted to the countless stories he had heard over the years, stories of professionals, artists, athletes, and everyday people who had faced similar indignities. Each story was a thread in a larger tapestry of injustice that demanded to be unraveled. Malik understood that the path ahead would be challenging. The forces he was up against were deeply entrenched and resistant to change. But he also knew that true power lay not in loud protest, but in quiet, calculated action. The time for endurance was over. The time for transformation had come. As the plane continued its steady course across the sky, Malik reached into his briefcase and retrieved a sleek, matte black satellite phone. This device was not a luxury gadget for travelers, but a tool reserved for those who shaped industries and influenced markets. He turned the device over in his hands, feeling the weight of responsibility settle over him like a mantle. With deliberate calm, Malik activated the phone and initiated a secure connection to his COO, Jasmine Lee. "Jasmine," he said, his voice steady and composed. "It's time." On the other end, Jasmine's voice was sharp with anticipation. "Understood. Initiating Project Skylift. Full acquisition protocol for Aerosky Airlines begins now." Malik exhaled quietly. The first step in a plan months in the making now set in motion. Back in the cabin, Patricia Vaughn continued her rounds, unaware that the very man she had dismissed was now orchestrating a corporate takeover that would shake Aerosky to its core. The flight continued, the hum of engines a steady backdrop to the unfolding revolution. Malik Johnson sat quietly in his seat 2B as the first-class cabin settled into a comfortable routine. Outside, the world sped beneath the wings of the plane. But inside, something far more significant was taking shape, something unseen but powerful. His tablet glowed softly, displaying cascading columns of stock values, market trends, and encrypted communications. With steady fingers, Malik initiated a private access protocol, bypassing standard bandwidth limitations. The device hummed to life with a complexity reserved for few. This was no ordinary flight. Malik was executing a corporate strategy that would ripple through the airline industry and beyond. Minutes later, his COO, Jasmine Lee, sent an encrypted message confirming the start of Project Skylift, the hostile acquisition of Aerosky Airlines. Through a web of shell companies and rapid stock purchases across multiple exchanges, Malik's firm was quietly taking control. Back in the cabin, unaware of the digital storm brewing, Patricia Vaughn continued her duties with the same dismissive air. Her eyes occasionally flicked toward Malik, suspicion lingering despite her earlier encounters. Luis Ramirez, the junior flight attendant, moved quietly, torn between his role and the empathy he felt for Malik. He had witnessed the subtle discrimination but felt powerless in the rigid hierarchy of the crew. Meanwhile, Victor Hale continued his documentation. His phone, a silent witness to the unfolding injustice. Each moment was being preserved audio, video, and detailed notes building a case that no one could ignore. As the flight neared cruising altitude, Malik leaned back, his expression unreadable. Inside, a quiet storm raged, a calculated response to years of systemic bias. The cabin intercom crackled. "Ladies and gentlemen, we apologize for the unusual announcement. If there is a representative from Horizon Capital Partners aboard, please identify yourself to the cabin crew for an urgent corporate message." The announcement sent a ripple of confusion through the cabin. Patricia's composed facade cracked. Her hands trembled slightly as she approached Malik. "Mr. Johnson," she said, voice strained. "There is a request from corporate to speak with you immediately after landing." Malik nodded, his calm unshaken. "Thank you." As the plane descended, Malik reviewed the documents on his tablet. His firm now held a controlling interest in Aerosky Airlines 41% and climbing rapidly. Back at Aerosky's headquarters, chaos reigned. CEO Olivia Matthews stared at the plummeting stock charts in disbelief. Calls flooded in from shareholders demanding explanations. Legal teams scrambled to understand the unprecedented hostile takeover. Defensive strategies were hastily deployed, but Malik's advance was relentless and silent. The airline sent urgent messages to every flight crew, instructing them to identify any passengers affiliated with Horizon Capital Partners. Flight attendants scanned passenger lists feverishly, but Malik's careful privacy settings obscured his affiliations. The captain of Malik's flight, seasoned and pragmatic, received the directive with a mix of disbelief and resignation. Orders were relayed to cabin staff with an undercurrent of urgency. Patricia and Luis exchanged anxious glances. The fragile order within the first-class cabin was unraveling. Malik sat unmoved. the legacy watch on his wrist a reminder of the resolve that had brought him this far. As the plane touched down and taxied to gate C-17, a delegation of Aerosky executives and security personnel awaited anxiously. Patricia approached Malik with an altered demeanor deference mixed with panic. "Mr. Johnson, on behalf of Aerosky, I sincerely apologize for the treatment you have received today." Malik regarded her with measured calm. "Apologies are not enough. Systemic change is required. The CEO of Aerosky herself, Olivia Matthews, boarded the plane personally, a breach of protocol that spoke volumes." She extended a hand toward Malik. "Mr. Johnson, I am Olivia Matthews. We need to discuss the situation urgently." Malik stood, towering in the confined space. His voice was calm, but carried undeniable authority. "I now hold majority control of Aerosky. I expect respect for every passenger, regardless of background." The cabin crew exchanged stunned glances. The quiet man they had dismissed was now their new boss. The sleek glass doors of Aerosky Airline's downtown headquarters parted silently as Malik Johnson stepped inside, flanked by his legal and executive teams. The atmosphere was charged, thick with anticipation and unease. What had started as a routine flight was now the epicenter of a corporate upheaval. Malik's presence at the head of the long mahogany conference table was a striking symbol of change. Around him sat a diverse group of professionals from Horizon Capital Partners, their quiet confidence a stark contrast to the anxious Aerosky executives arrayed opposite. The meeting began without introductions. Malik activated a presentation, and the room darkened as high-definition footage played on the wall-mounted screens. First, security camera footage from Jefferson International Airport showed the gate agent Claire Simmons interacting with Malik. The audio captured her condescending tone as she questioned his right to board first class. The room fell silent as the replay echoed through the space. Next came in-flight recordings, Patricia Vaughn's voice clear as she dismissed Malik's requests and insinuated he belonged in economy. Her whispered comments about Malik's credentials and status were damning. Malik's voice cut through the silence. "This is not an isolated incident. It is systemic." The screens shifted to detailed statistical analyses. Charts showed minority first-class passengers faced verification checks at rates exponentially higher than their white counterparts. Internal communications revealed coded language instructing staff to maintain cabin atmosphere by targeting passengers who don't fit the usual profile. Board members shifted uncomfortably. Emails between management staff showed how complaints were buried or dismissed. A chart revealed 73 formal discrimination complaints over the past year, all ignored or downplayed. Olivia Matthews, still officially CEO, attempted damage control. While these incidents are concerning, I believe we can settle this matter privately. Name your price. Malik's gaze was steady, unwavering. This is not about money. It is about accountability and transformation. He outlined his non-negotiable terms with clinical precision. Immediate termination of all employees involved in discriminatory practices, starting with Claire Simmons and Patricia Vaughn. A complete overhaul of training protocols focused on eliminating racial bias. Appointment of an independent civil rights auditor with direct board access. A $50 million investment in diversity initiatives and scholarships for underrepresented groups in aviation. Restructuring the executive team to include qualified minority leaders at every level. Several board members opened their mouths to protest until Malik reminded them of their fiduciary duty to shareholders, which he now represented the majority of. This is not a negotiation. It is a notification of how we will proceed. The room fell silent. Legal counsel whispered urgently to Olivia. Confirming Malik's majority stake gave him full control. Downstairs, Claire Simmons and Patricia Vaughn sat rigidly in a stark white HR conference room. Their company badges had already been deactivated. Claire protested loudly. I was just following protocol, maintaining standards. The HR director raised an eyebrow. What profiles exactly? Claire faltered, realizing her misstep. People who don't fit the typical first-class profile. Malik entered quietly during her outburst. Claire's face drained of color. In a separate wing, Victor Hale prepared legal filings for a civil rights lawsuit with Malik as plaintiff. This case will set precedent across the industry. He told an associate. Back in the boardroom, Malik met privately with Olivia. You have a choice, he said calmly. Resign and cooperate with the transformation or face a public legal battle that will end your career and possibly the airline itself. Olivia attempted one last defense. I knew nothing of these incidents. The culture predates me. Malik's reply was firm. Ignorance is not innocence when you lead. She stared out the window, the fleet of aircraft visible on the tarmac. I will resign. The board reconvened. The vote passed unanimously. Malik's conditions were accepted. Olivia's resignation was processed. An interim CEO from Horizon Capital Partners was appointed. Malik exited the marathon meeting to notifications flooding his phone. News networks reported Aerosky's leadership transition amid hostile takeover rumors. Analysts connected dots that would soon reveal the full story. Months later, Aerosky rebranded as Equitable Airways. The changes were more than cosmetic, a new visual identity, redesigned boarding protocols, and a commitment to equitable treatment regardless of appearance. At boarding gates, uniform verification replaced biased assumptions. Quality control teams conducted blind audits to ensure fair service. Flight attendants underwent mandatory bias training. Customer satisfaction among minority passengers soared. Competing airlines scrambled to audit their own cultures. The Mercer effect was born. Luis Ramirez, once a hesitant flight attendant, now led diversity training. I was part of the problem, he told new hires. Now I make sure it doesn't happen again. At an international conference, Malik addressed executives. Discrimination isn't just morally wrong, it's bad business. The $90 million settlement Aerosky paid could have been invested in growth. Prejudice is expensive. Executives took notes. Self-preservation had achieved what moral arguments could not. Malik's journey was a testament to the power of quiet resolve turned strategic action. The silent battles for dignity, often unseen, could reshape industries and lives. Months had passed since Malik Johnson took control of Aerosky Airlines, now reborn as Equitable Airways. The airline's headquarters buzzed with renewed energy, a mix of cautious optimism and determined purpose. Malik's vision was clear to rebuild not just the company's reputation, but its very culture. The first step was transparency. Malik mandated open forums and listening sessions with employees at every level. The days of whispered complaints buried in HR files were over. Staff were encouraged to share experiences of bias and exclusion without fear of retaliation. Luis Ramirez had risen from junior flight attendant to lead the newly formed Diversity and Inclusion Task Force. His first-hand experience of the airline's flawed past gave him credibility and passion. During orientation sessions, he spoke candidly. I was part of the problem. Now, I'm part of the solution. Lewis told a room of new hires. His voice carried the weight of accountability and hope. Training programs were revamped with the help of experts in unconscious bias and cultural competency. Employees engaged in immersive workshops designed not just to educate, but to challenge deeply held assumptions. Malik's leadership style was deliberate and calm. He understood that true transformation was a marathon, not a sprint. Change required patience, persistence, and the courage to confront uncomfortable truths. Behind the scenes, Malik's legal and compliance teams worked tirelessly to audit every aspect of service delivery. Customer feedback mechanisms were enhanced, allowing passengers to report incidents anonymously and receive timely responses. Victor Hale remained a key ally, providing legal oversight and ensuring that promises translated into enforceable policies. At the airline's newly branded lounges, subtle but powerful symbols of inclusion were visible everywhere. Artwork by diverse artists adorned the walls. Menus featured global cuisines representing the communities the airline served. Staff uniforms were redesigned to reflect a modern, multicultural ethos. During a quarterly shareholder meeting, Malik addressed the crowd with quiet authority. Discrimination is not just a moral failing, it is a business risk, he said. Equitable Airways is committed to leading the industry in fairness, respect, and excellence. The company's financial performance mirrored the cultural shift. Customer satisfaction scores climbed, particularly among minority travelers. Investor confidence returned, and the stock price stabilized. Yet, Malik knew the work was far from over. Change at this scale invited resistance. Old habits die hard, and pockets of skepticism remained. One morning, Malik received a confidential report detailing isolated incidents of bias on a recent flight. While disappointing, he viewed it as an opportunity. He convened a task force meeting, emphasizing accountability. "We must own these failures and respond swiftly," he instructed. "Every passenger deserves dignity, no exception." The task force implemented real-time monitoring of service interactions and deployed rapid response teams to investigate complaints. Meanwhile, Luis Ramirez piloted a new initiative pairing seasoned employees with younger hires from underrepresented backgrounds. The mentorship program fostered empathy, understanding, and professional growth. Malik's calm resolve inspired confidence. His own journey from a man profiled and dismissed to the airline's CEO was a powerful narrative shared across the company. Employees often remarked on his quiet strength. Malik never raised his voice, but commanded respect through presence and principle. Outside the corporate walls, Malik became a sought-after speaker on diversity and leadership. He emphasized the economic imperative of inclusion alongside the ethical mandate. At an international aviation summit, Malik addressed hundreds of industry leaders. "Inclusion drives innovation," he said. "Companies that embrace diversity outperform those that cling to outdated norms. We have a responsibility to lead by example." His words resonated widely, sparking conversations beyond the aviation sector. Back at Equitable Airways, Malik paused in his office one afternoon, gazing out at the fleet lined up on the tarmac. A small plaque rested on his desk, bearing the airline's new motto, "Dignity is everyone's destination." He allowed himself a rare, small smile. The journey had been long and difficult, but the destination was worth every step. In the quiet moments, Malik reflected on the power of dignity not as a fragile ideal, but as a formidable force for change. He had transformed a personal injustice into a catalyst for systemic reform. The airline's rebirth was more than business. It was a declaration that respect and equality were non-negotiable. As the sun set behind the airport's control tower, Malik prepared for his next flight, a flight aboard the very airline he had reshaped. The experience promised to be different this time, not just for him, but for every passenger who boarded. The boarding process at Equitable Airways' flagship lounge was noticeably different from Malik Johnson's first encounter at Aero Sky. The staff moved with genuine warmth and professionalism, greeting every passenger with respect and courtesy. The long lines melted away as agents verified credentials efficiently and without hesitation, treating every traveler equally. Malik entered the lounge with a sense of quiet satisfaction. Gone were the suspicious glances and hesitant verifications that had marred his previous flights. Now, he was simply another passenger, welcomed and acknowledged without question. He settled into a comfortable leather chair near the window, gazing out at the runway. Across the room, Luis Ramirez, now the airline's chief diversity officer, led a group of new recruits through an orientation session. Malik smiled to himself, recalling Luis's transformation from a hesitant junior attendant to a passionate advocate for inclusion. As Malik prepared to board, he noticed a young black woman in business attire approaching the lounge entrance. She carried herself with poise, but bore the unmistakable weight of quiet anxiety. Luis noticed her as well and stepped forward to greet her with a warm smile. The woman returned the smile with relief. Malik observed their interaction. Recognizing the significance of this moment, new generations stepping into spaces once denied. On board Flight 512, Malik found his seat 2B and settled in with a calm assurance born of experience. The cabin crew moved through the cabin with attentive efficiency, offering menus, beverages, and assistance with genuine care. Luis approached Malik's seat with a friendly nod. "Welcome aboard, Mr. Johnson," he said. "Please let me know if there is anything you need." Malik nodded appreciatively. "Thank you, Luis." The flight took off smoothly, the city skyline receding beneath a canopy of clouds. Malik glanced out the window, reflecting on the journey from exclusion to inclusion, not just for himself but for the countless others who would follow. During the meal service, Malik noticed a plaque near the galley displaying the airline's new guiding principle, "Dignity is everyone's destination." It was more than a slogan. It was a commitment etched into the fabric of the company. Passengers chatted comfortably, the atmosphere free of tension and suspicion. Malik caught the eye of the young black woman from the lounge. She smiled back, a silent acknowledgement of shared progress. Luis checked in on Malik throughout the flight, ensuring every need was met. Malik's sense of calm contrasted sharply with the turmoil of past experiences. As the plane descended toward their destination, Malik prepared to disembark, his thoughts filled with both gratitude and resolve. Outside, the aviation industry was taking note. Equitable Airways had become a beacon of change, inspiring competitors to reevaluate their own cultures and policies. Malik's quiet revolution had sparked an industry-wide conversation about equity and respect, proving that dignity was not a privilege but a right. At the gate, Malik was greeted by journalists and advocates eager to hear his story. He spoke with measured humility, emphasizing the collective effort required to dismantle systemic bias. "Change begins with awareness," Malik said, "but it must be followed by action intentional, consistent, and unyielding." As Malik left the airport, he carried with him the legacy of resilience, the power of quiet strength, and the knowledge that one person's dignity can become a catalyst for transformation. The morning sun cast long shadows over Equitable Airways' newly branded headquarters, a modern glass structure that reflected the city skyline and a promise of change. Inside, Malik Johnson stood in the lobby, watching as employees moved purposefully toward their workstations. The energy was different now, hopeful, purposeful, and inclusive. Malik reflected on the journey that had brought him here, from a passenger repeatedly questioned and dismissed to the majority owner of the airline. His path was not one of loud protest or public outcry, but one marked by quiet determination, strategic precision, and unwavering dignity. A small plaque near the entrance caught his eye. It bore the company's new motto, "Dignity is everyone's destination." These words were not just a statement, they were a commitment woven into every policy, every interaction, and every flight. Malik's phone buzzed softly. A message from Luis Ramirez, the Chief Diversity Officer, invited him to an upcoming employee forum focused on continued progress and accountability. Malik smiled. These forums had become a cornerstone of the company's culture, providing a space for honest conversation and collective growth. The transformation was visible everywhere. At boarding gates, staff verified documents with consistent professionalism, free from bias or suspicion. Flight attendants received regular training on unconscious bias and cultural competency. Customer feedback systems were enhanced, ensuring every complaint was taken seriously and addressed promptly. Equitable Airways had become a model for the industry. Competitors watched closely, pressured to follow suit or risk falling behind. Malik thought about the countless passengers who, like him, had endured exclusion and disrespect. Their stories fueled his resolve to make the airline a place where everyone was welcomed with dignity and respect. He paused before a mural painted by local artists, depicting diverse communities united in flight, a symbol of inclusion soaring above barriers. In his office, Malik reviewed reports showing dramatic improvements in customer satisfaction, especially among minority passengers. The airline's stock had stabilized, and investor confidence had returned. But more importantly, the culture had shifted. Malik knew the journey was ongoing. Systemic change required vigilance and commitment. Old biases could resurface if left unchecked. Later that day, Malik addressed a packed auditorium of aviation leaders and industry stakeholders. His voice was calm but carried the weight of experience. Discrimination is not just a moral failing, it is a threat to innovation, growth, and trust. He said, "Equity and respect are not optional. They are essential to success." He shared the story of his flight, the indignities endured, the strategy employed, and the transformation ignited. His message resonated deeply. The audience, a diverse assembly of executives, policymakers, and advocates, listened intently. Malik concluded with a challenge. Let this be a turning point, not just for Equitable Airways, but for the entire industry. Together, we can chart a new flight path, one where dignity is the destination for all. As Malik left the stage, he felt a profound sense of purpose. His journey had come full circle, from a man denied his rightful place to a leader reshaping an entire industry. The hum of the aircraft engines, once a backdrop to exclusion, now symbolized the power of quiet strength and deliberate action. Malik Johnson's story was a testament to the enduring truth that dignity, respect, and justice are not privileges for the few, but rights for everyone. And as the plane soared into the horizon, so too did the promise of a more equitable future. Malik Johnson's story reminds us that discrimination is never just a personal slight. It's a wound in the fabric of society that demands healing. Through quiet strength and unwavering resolve, Malik transformed pain into purpose, turning a humiliating encounter into a powerful catalyst for change. His journey teaches us that dignity is not negotiable, and respect should never depend on who we are or what we look like. As we reflect on this story, let us hold space for empathy and action. Let's honor those who face bias daily and commit ourselves to being allies who speak up, document injustice, and demand accountability. The fight against discrimination is ongoing, and it requires all of us to be silent defenders of dignity. If Malik's story moved you, if it sparked a new understanding or a call to action, please like this video, share it widely, and subscribe to our channel. We have many more stories that shine a light on quiet courage, strategic triumphs, and the heroes who are changing the world one step at a time. Thank you for watching. Stand with us, and we'll see you in the next story.